It was a humid summer afternoon in Montgomery, Alabama. The bus rumbled down the road, its old seats creaking under the weight of the passengers. The air smelled of gasoline and tension. People were tired from work, drenched in sweat, and desperate to get home. Among the passengers that day was Clara Jenkins, a 42-year-old black woman who had just finished her shift as a nurse at the local hospital. Her feet ached, her scrubs were damp, and all she wanted was to sit and rest. She stepped onto the bus, smiled politely at the driver, and dropped a few coins into the fare box. The bus driver, Bill Turner, was a burly man in his late 50s with a permanent scowl carved into his face. He had been driving that route for over 20 years, and everyone in town knew him for his short temper and arrogant attitude. Bill was one of those men who still thought the world hadn't changed, that some people didn't deserve respect, depending on the color of their skin. Clara quietly took an empty seat near the front, right behind the driver. She pulled out her phone and started reading messages from her daughter, who had just been accepted into college. Her heart filled with pride. All those years of double shifts were finally paying off. Then, Bill's voice boomed through the bus. "Hey! You can't sit there," he barked. Clara looked up, confused. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Bill sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "Seats up front are for white folks. You sit in the back where you belong." The entire bus went silent. Some passengers looked away. Others shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke up. Clara's face tightened. For a moment, she thought about standing and moving to avoid a scene. But something inside her, years of silent suffering, humiliation, and injustice, made her stay seated. She looked up calmly at the driver and said, "Sir, it's 2025. I paid my fare like everyone else. I'll sit where I please." Bill's face turned red. "If you don't move, I'll call the cops and have you thrown off this bus." Clara stared at him, her voice steady but firm. "Do what you have to do." The driver slammed the brakes. Passengers jolted forward, clutching their seats. He picked up his radio and started yelling at dispatch, demanding police assistance at the next stop. The bus came to a screeching halt outside a gas station. Clara stayed still. The silence was thick. Some people muttered under their breath, others shook their heads, but still, no one intervened. Moments later, a black SUV pulled up beside the bus. Two men stepped out. One of them was tall, wearing a crisp uniform, Captain Raymond Harris, the newly appointed chief of police. Bill smirked, thinking help had arrived. "About time you showed up, Ray. Got myself a troublemaker here, won't follow the rules." He jabbed his thumb toward Clara. Captain Harris walked onto the bus, his expression unreadable. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked. "This woman," Bill said with a sneer, "refuses to move to the back. Thinks she's too good for the rules." The captain's eyes shifted toward Clara, and his face softened. "Ma'am, are you all right?" "Yes," Clara said quietly. "Just trying to get home." Then something unexpected happened. Captain Harris turned toward Bill. "You said rules? Which rules are those?" Bill blinked, caught off guard. "You know what I mean, bus policy. Always been that way." The captain crossed his arms. "That policy doesn't exist anymore. Not in this century. And certainly not in my city." Bill's smirk faded. "Listen, Ray, I've been driving this route longer than you've been in uniform." "That's enough," the captain interrupted sharply. "Step off the bus." "What? Why?" Bill snapped. "Because you're under arrest," Harris said. The bus gasped. Even Clara's eyes widened. "For what?" Bill shouted. "For harassment, discrimination, and reckless endangerment of your passengers when you slammed those brakes," Harris said coldly. "I've had complaints about you before. I guess today's the day karma finally caught up." Bill's face went pale as two officers cuffed him. Passengers whispered, some recording the scene on their phones. As Bill was led away, Captain Harris turned back to Clara. "Ma'am, I'm sorry you had to experience this. My officers will escort you home safely." Clara smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you, Captain." When she stepped off the bus, people began to clap softly. It started with one person, then two, until the entire bus was applauding her courage. Later that evening, a local news crew aired the footage that had gone viral within hours. Headlines read, "Bus driver arrested after forcing black woman to move, police chief intervenes." The video spread across social media, sparking a wave of outrage and support. People praised Clara for standing her ground and celebrated Captain Harris for his integrity. The bus company issued a public apology and announced new mandatory sensitivity and ethics training for all employees. Bill Turner was fired the same day. 3 minutes of hate, that's all it took for karma to strike. But for Clara, it was more than just justice. It was proof that courage, even in silence, can change the course of a day, or even a lifetime. As she sat at home that night, sipping her tea, Clara smiled. Her daughter's message buzzed on the screen again. Mom, I saw the news. I'm so proud of you. Clara looked out the window at the quiet city and whispered, maybe things are changing. And for the first time in a long while, she truly believed it. 3 weeks had passed since that unforgettable day on the Montgomery City bus. The video of Clara Jenkins standing up to discrimination had taken the internet by storm. Millions had watched, shared, and praised her courage. But while the world saw a viral hero, Clara was still just trying to live her quiet life, going to work, caring for patients, and raising her daughter, Tiana. Yet, fame has a strange way of knocking on doors you never expected to open. Clara's hospital supervisor called her into the office one morning. Her heart thudded nervously. She wasn't sure what to expect. When she stepped inside, her supervisor, Dr. Elaine Morris, stood with a warm smile. Clara, she said, I've just gotten off the phone with the board. We saw what you did, your courage, your grace. We'd like to promote you to head nurse. Clara froze, stunned. Head nurse? But You've earned it, Dr. Morris interrupted. Not just for your years of service, but for showing what true strength looks like. Our patients, our staff, they need people like you leading them. Tears welled up in Clara's eyes. For years she had worked double shifts, covered for others, and sacrificed her time with Tiana just to keep the lights on. Finally, something good had come from all those long nights. She accepted the offer, grateful and humbled. But little did she know, while her life was turning upward, Bill Turner's life was spiraling in the opposite direction. Bill sat alone in a rundown bar on the outskirts of Montgomery. His uniform was gone, replaced by a wrinkled shirt and bitterness. Since his arrest, he had lost his job, his pension, and the respect of everyone around him. He took a sip of his beer, glaring at the muted TV above the bar. A news segment was still playing the footage of his humiliation. The headline read, "Heroic woman stands up against racist bus driver, justice served." Bill muttered under his breath, "Justice, my foot." He was angry, not just at Clara, but at himself, though he'd never admit it. The bar door creaked open, and a man in uniform walked in. It was Captain Raymond Harris. Bill stiffened. "Oh, great. The hero cop," he spat. Harris approached calmly. "Didn't expect to find you here, Bill." "Why? You come to rub it in?" Bill barked. "You ruined my life." The captain pulled up a stool beside him. "No, Bill. You ruined your own life. All I did was make sure you faced what you've been avoiding, the truth." Bill scowled. "You people always talking about truth and justice. Maybe I just spoke my mind." "Maybe," Harris said evenly. "But your mind hurt people. It could have gotten someone killed that day when you slammed the brakes. You ever think about that?" Bill didn't answer. He just stared at the bottom of his glass. After a long pause, Harris said quietly, "You know, I looked up your record. You used to be a good man, veteran, hard worker. What happened to that guy?" Bill's jaw tightened. "Life happened. You wouldn't understand." Harris stood up. "Maybe not. But you've got a choice now, stay angry, or change. It's never too late." And with that, the captain walked out, leaving Bill alone with his thoughts. Life had taken a bright turn. She had started speaking at community events about equality and courage, something she never imagined herself doing. Reporters wanted interviews, schools invited her for talks, and even the mayor reached out to commend her bravery, but Clara remained humble. Whenever someone asked her why she did it, she simply said, "Because I was tired of being quiet." One Friday evening, she was invited to speak at the Montgomery Civic Hall, the same street where the old bus stop stood. She hesitated before accepting, unsure if she was ready to revisit that moment. When she arrived at the hall, the place was packed. As she stepped onto the stage, the crowd stood and clapped. She took a deep breath, smiled, and began, "I didn't stand up that day to be famous. I stood up because silence gives power to hate. And sometimes, all it takes is one voice to remind people of what's right." Her words echoed through the hall. She noticed a man sitting near the back, head lowered, hands clasped tightly together. Even from a distance, she recognized him. Bill Turner. After the speech, as the crowd filtered out, Bill walked up to her slowly. His eyes were tired, his voice quiet. "Miss Jenkins. I wanted to say. I'm sorry." Clara was silent for a moment. She studied his face. The anger was gone, replaced by regret. "I lost everything," Bill continued. "But maybe I needed to. I can't change what I did, but I want to do better." Clara looked at him thoughtfully, then nodded. "That's a start, Mr. Turner. Change begins with truth, and the courage to face it." They shook hands, a simple gesture, but powerful. The crowd watched, and for the first time in years, Bill Turner felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. A new city bus was unveiled, painted with the words "Equality rides with us." It was part of a new initiative promoting unity and diversity, led by none other than Clara Jenkins, with Captain Harris overseeing the city's safety program, and standing quietly in the back of the ceremony, wearing a simple volunteer badge, was Bill Turner, helping people board the bus he once ruled with hate. As Clara stepped aboard for the ceremonial first ride, she turned, smiled at him, and said, "Looks like we both found our seats." Bill nodded, humbled. "Yeah. Guess karma's not always about punishment, sometimes it's about lessons." The bus doors closed, the engine roared to life, and as it rolled forward, sunlight streamed through the windows, a sign, perhaps, that even the darkest hearts can find their way back to the light. It had been 12 years since that hot afternoon when Clara Jenkins refused to move to the back of the bus. The story that once made headlines was now part of local history, told in schools and shared across generations. People remembered Clara not just as a woman who stood her ground, but as the one who changed hearts. Clara's hair had silvered, her voice had softened, but her spirit was still unshakable. She now worked part-time at the same hospital where she once fought exhaustion for her family. The rest of her time, she spent mentoring young nurses and volunteering at community centers, but this story wasn't about her anymore. It was about Tiana Jenkins, her daughter, the girl who once texted, "Mom, I'm proud of you." Tiana was now 24, a bright law student at Howard University. She had inherited her mother's quiet strength and her father's sense of humor. Everywhere she went, people recognized her name. "You're that Jenkins," they'd say, smiling. "Your mom's story inspired me." She always smiled politely, but deep down, she struggled with the weight of that legacy. It wasn't easy being the daughter of someone everyone admired. People expected her to be brave, calm, unbreakable. But inside, she sometimes felt uncertain, like courage was something she had to earn, not inherit. One evening, Tiana received a call from her mother. "Baby," Clara said, her voice warm, "the city's holding a memorial event next week. They're naming a bus stop after me." Tiana's eyes filled with pride. "Mom, that's amazing. I want you to come," Clara said softly. "And I want you to speak." "Me?" Tiana stammered. "Mom, I'm not good at that kind of thing. Everyone will be looking at me, expecting me to be like you." Clara chuckled. "Sweetheart, I didn't plan to be brave either. I was just tired of being small." Those words stayed with Tiana long after she hung up. A few days later, Tiana boarded a city bus on her way to class. It was crowded, students, workers, parents, all crammed together. She found a seat near the middle and put on her headphones. The next stop, an elderly man with a cane stepped on. No one moved. Everyone was buried in their phones. Tiana hesitated for a second, then stood up and offered her seat. "Thank you, young lady," the man said, settling down gratefully. As the bus rolled on, a loud argument broke out near the front. A young black teenager, maybe 16, was standing while the driver, a middle-aged woman this time, was shouting at him. "I told you, no food on my bus," the driver barked. "I ain't eating it." "I'm just holding it for my sister," the boy protested. The tension in the air was all too familiar. People looked away, whispering. No one intervened. Tiana's heart pounded. It was like watching history try to repeat itself. She stood up. "Ma'am, he's not doing anything wrong," she said firmly. The driver glared. "Stay out of it, miss. Rules are rules." Tiana took a deep breath, her mother's words echoing in her mind. "I didn't plan to be brave either," she spoke again, louder this time. "Then maybe your rules need to change." The bus went silent. The driver's face softened slightly. She sighed and muttered, "Fine. Just keep it closed." The boy nodded and sat down quietly. Tiana returned to her spot, her heart still racing, but this time, she smiled. It wasn't about arguing. It was about standing up when it mattered. A woman sitting nearby leaned over and whispered, "You sound just like your mama." Tiana laughed. "So I've been told." The day of the memorial arrived. The sun was bright, the air crisp with pride and remembrance. The city had decorated the new Clara Jenkins Equality Stop with banners and flowers. Reporters lined the streets, and a small crowd gathered, friends, neighbors, students, and even a few city officials. Among them was Bill Turner, now an old man with kind eyes and a slow walk. He had been volunteering with the city's diversity program for years, working quietly to rebuild what he had once destroyed. When he saw Clara, he smiled humbly. "Didn't think I'd live to see this day," he said. Clara smiled back. "Neither did I, Bill. Life's funny that way." The mayor took the stage first, honoring Clara for her courage and the legacy that followed. Then it was Tiana's turn. She stepped up to the microphone, her hands trembling slightly. "Good afternoon," she began. "I'm Tiana Jenkins, Clara's daughter. 12 years ago, my mother sat on a bus and refused to give up her seat. What she didn't know was that she wasn't just standing up for herself, she was making a place for all of us to stand." The crowd listened in silence. She taught me that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it's just a quiet voice saying, no more. And today, I want to thank her, not just for what she did that day, but for who she is every day. Tiana looked over at her mother, tears glistening in her eyes. You showed me that one person can make a difference. And now, it's my turn to keep that difference alive. The audience rose in applause. Clara wiped a tear and smiled, her heart full. As the ceremony ended, the first bus pulled up to the newly named stop. On its side, in bold letters, were the words, "One voice can change everything." Clara and Tiana boarded together. The driver, none other than Bill Turner's grandson, now part of the city's new driver program, smiled and said, "Welcome aboard, Miss Jenkins." Clara laughed. "Thank you, young man." Tiana looked around the bus. Different faces, different colors, all sitting side by side. No one was told where to sit. No one was told where they didn't belong. As the bus rolled down the same street where it all began, Clara leaned her head against the window and whispered, "We've come a long way." Tiana smiled softly. "And we're not done yet." The bus rumbled forward, sunlight glinting off its windows, a moving symbol of unity, justice, and change, because sometimes, courage doesn't end with one person. It lives on in those who come after. It rides on in every heart that refuses to go to the back. It had been 8 years since the city honored Clara Jenkins with her own bus stop, and nearly 20 since the day she changed history by refusing to move to the back. Her story had become more than just a viral moment, it was a legacy. Schools taught it. Murals were painted in her name. And her daughter, Tiana Jenkins, had taken that legacy and turned it into a mission. At 32, Tiana was now one of the most respected civil rights attorneys in Alabama. Calm, determined, and unshakably fair, just like her mother. Her small office downtown carried a framed photo of Clara, sitting proudly on that bus years ago, head held high. Below it hung a quote Tiana lived by every day: "Courage is contagious." It was a Monday morning when Tiana's secretary knocked on her office door. "Ms. Jenkins, there's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent." "Send them in," Tiana said. Closing a law book, the door opened, and in walked a woman in her 50s, dressed in a faded uniform from a local transit company. Her name tag read L. Peterson. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "My name's Linda Peterson. I drive for Metro Transit. They suspended me last week, because I stopped a man from harassing one of my passengers." Tiana's brows furrowed. "Suspended? For stopping harassment?" Linda nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "The man was yelling racial slurs at a teenage boy. I pulled over, called dispatch, and asked him to leave. Turns out, he was the cousin of one of the city councilmen. They said I violated protocol and embarrassed the department." Tiana leaned back, her expression calm but her eyes sharp. "You did the right thing. And if they're punishing you for that, we'll fight it." That same spark that once burned in her mother's eyes now glowed in Tiana's. She accepted the case. As Tiana began preparing, she couldn't help but notice the parallels. A bus. An injustice. A woman punished for doing what was right. That night, she called her mother. "Mom," Tiana said softly, "you ever feel like history just repeats itself?" Clara chuckled on the other end of the line. "Honey, history doesn't repeat itself. It tests us to see if we've learned." Tiana smiled. "Then it's my turn to pass the test." The case quickly gained attention. Reporters filled the courthouse steps. "Hero bus driver suspended after stopping racist passenger," the headlines read. In court, the opposing side tried to paint Linda as unprofessional and reckless. But Tiana stood tall, her calm voice commanding every corner of the room. "Your Honor," she said, stepping forward, "this isn't just about a bus driver. This is about the right to protect another human being from hate. If standing up to discrimination is a violation, then the law itself needs to change." The room was silent. The judge, a stern-looking man with gray hair, looked down thoughtfully. When the opposing lawyer tried to discredit Linda, Tiana pulled out her final piece of evidence, a video from a passenger's phone. The courtroom screens flickered to life. The footage showed Linda calmly asking the man to stop shouting, while passengers begged him to leave. It ended with Linda calling dispatch, never once losing control. The truth was undeniable. Tiana turned to the judge. "That's what integrity looks like." The ruling came later that afternoon. After reviewing all evidence, the judge said, "This court finds that Ms. Peterson acted in good faith, within her rights, and in defense of public safety. The suspension is hereby overturned." Gasps filled the courtroom, then cheers. Linda burst into tears, hugging Tiana tightly. "You don't know what this means to me," she whispered. Tiana smiled. "Actually," she said softly, "I do." The next morning, news of the case spread across the nation. Talk shows called it "The Jenkins Legacy Continues." But Tiana wasn't chasing fame, she was fighting for fairness. That evening, she visited her mother, who was sitting on the porch with a cup of tea and a proud smile. Looks like my baby made the news again, Clara said with a wink. Tiana laughed. Guess the apple didn't fall far from the bus seat. They both laughed. Clara grew quiet for a moment. You know, I used to wonder if what I did really mattered. All those years ago, sitting on that bus. Tiana took her hand. It mattered, Mom. Because of you, people learned to stand. And because of that, I learned to fight.